Standing in that courtroom, I never imagined my own flesh and blood could betray me so completely. My sister Jennifer smugly held my husband Jack's hand while demanding I pay child support for their secret baby. My parents stood beside them, glaring at me with disappointment. 5 months ago, I was planning my 5th wedding anniversary. Now I was fighting not to financially support the ultimate betrayal. The judge asked for my response. I smiled calmly. They had no idea what evidence I was about to present. Everyone thought I had the perfect life. From the outside looking in, there was nothing to complain about. I had built a successful career as a pediatric nurse at Atlanta Memorial, working my way up to department supervisor over 8 years. Jack and I owned a beautiful 2-story home in a leafy suburb with a wraparound porch where we hosted summer barbecues. We had just celebrated our 5th wedding anniversary with a trip to the Florida Keys. Friends and colleagues constantly told me how lucky I was to have such a perfect marriage. Growing up in Westlake, Georgia, I always played the responsible role in my family. As the oldest daughter, I learned early to look after my younger sister, Jennifer. Our parents made it clear from the beginning that Jennifer was special and needed extra attention. She was born with perfect features and a magnetic personality that drew people in. I was the plain one, the responsible one, the one who made sure homework got done and dinner was on the table when our parents worked late. "Daisy, look after your sister. She's not as practical as you," my mom would say. It was always Jennifer needs and Jennifer wants, and can't you just help Jennifer with her math homework? I didn't resent it back then. I loved my sister and felt protective of her. I believed that's what big sisters were supposed to do. I met Jack Donovan at a hospital fundraiser 6 years ago. He was working as an accountant for a healthcare management firm and volunteered to help with the charity auction. He had wavy brown hair, warm hazel eyes, and a smile that made my heart skip. When he asked for my number, I almost looked over my shoulder to check if he was talking to someone else. Our first date was dinner at a small Italian restaurant downtown, where we talked until the waitstaff started stacking chairs. 3 months later, he proposed on a hot air balloon ride over the North Georgia mountains. I said yes without hesitation. The wedding was beautiful, even though my parents insisted on spending more on Jennifer's maid of honor dress than they contributed to my bridal gown. "She's so photogenic, Daisy." "We want everything to be perfect," my mother explained. I didn't argue. I was too happy to let anything spoil my day. Jack and I tried for a baby starting in our 2nd year of marriage. Month after month, I took tests that came back negative. We started fertility treatments in year 3. The emotional roller coaster was exhausting, but Jack seemed supportive, holding my hand through hormone injections and disappointments. "It'll happen when it's meant to happen," he would say, kissing my forehead. "We're in this together." Meanwhile, Jennifer bounced from job to job, relationship to relationship. She worked as a bartender, then a retail associate, then a receptionist, never lasting more than 6 months anywhere. Her boyfriends came and went just as quickly, and through it all, she'd call me when she needed money for rent or to bail her out of some financial mess. "Jen, you need to be more responsible with your money." I'd lecture while writing another check. "We can't all be perfect like you, Daisy," she'd reply with that smile that always melted my resolve. "Besides, you and Jack have so much, and I have so little." 8 months ago, Jennifer called crying. She'd been evicted from her apartment after missing 3 months of rent. Without hesitation, I offered our guest room until she got back on her feet. "You're a lifesaver, sis," she said, hugging me when she arrived with 3 suitcases and her pet parakeet. Jack seemed less enthusiastic, but agreed it was the right thing to do. "Family is family," he said with a tight smile. "Just make sure it's temporary." For the first few weeks, everything was fine. Jennifer helped with dishes, contributed to groceries from her unemployment checks, and seemed genuinely grateful. I even thought having her around might help our marriage, which had grown strained with the pressure of fertility treatments and disappointments. Then came the morning that changed everything. I was emptying bathroom trash cans when I found a positive pregnancy test wrapped in toilet paper. My heart nearly stopped. After years of trying, could it finally have happened? I had just started a new round of fertility treatments, but it seemed too soon for results. Still, miracles happened, right? I floated through my hospital shift that day, distracted and excited, planning how to tell Jack the news that night. I came home early, stopping to buy a bottle of sparkling cider to celebrate. I was hanging my coat when I heard voices from the kitchen. Jack had come home early, too. "We need to be smart about this," he was saying in a low voice. "I'll talk to my lawyer about options." "I'm not getting rid of our baby," Jennifer replied. There was a pause. "Don't look at me like that. You said you loved me." "I do, but the timing is all wrong. Daisy's been so fragile lately with all the failed treatments. This will destroy her." I stood frozen in the hallway, my world collapsing around me. The pregnancy test wasn't mine. It was my sister's. And the father was my husband. "When are we going to tell her?" Jennifer asked. "I don't know. But I promise we'll figure this out. This baby, our baby, deserves a real family." I must have made a sound, because they both stopped talking. I stepped into the kitchen doorway, the bottle of cider still clutched in my hand. Jennifer sat at our kitchen island, my husband's hand covering hers. When they saw my face, they knew I had heard everything. The cider bottles shattered on our tile floor, spraying glass and liquid everywhere, just like my perfect life. "How could you?" The words came out as a whisper, but they felt like they were ripped from my soul. "My husband? My sister?" Jack moved toward me first. "Daisy, baby, it's not what you think." I backed away, feeling the crunch of glass under my shoes. "Not what I think?" "I heard you. Our baby, you said. Our baby." Jennifer slid off the bar stool, her hand protectively covering her still flat stomach. "Daisy, we never meant to hurt you." I laughed, a harsh sound I barely recognized. "Never meant to hurt me? You're pregnant with my husband's child, while living in my house. What exactly did you think would happen?" Jack attempted to take my arm, but I jerked away. "It was a mistake, Days. One night when you were working that double shift, we were drinking, watching a movie. It just happened." I turned to Jennifer. "Is that true? Just one drunken mistake?" She looked at Jack, then back at me. Something flashed in her eyes before she lowered them. "No. We've been seeing each other for months. Jack and we're in love." Jack's face contorted. "Jen, we agreed to ease her into this." "Ease me into this?" I repeated, feeling my shock transform into white-hot anger. "How considerate of you both." "It wasn't planned," Jack insisted. "But now there's a baby involved. We need to think about what's best for everyone." "What's best?" I was shouting now. "What's best would have been not sleeping with my sister. What's best would have been honoring our marriage vows. What's best would have been basic human decency." I stormed upstairs and grabbed a suitcase from our closet, throwing in clothes blindly. Jack followed, pleading and making excuses. His story changed with every sentence, from a one-time mistake to an undeniable connection to being unhappy in our marriage for years. "Was it all a lie?" I asked, pausing with a handful of socks. "The fertility treatments, planning for our future, all of it?" "No, I wanted those things," he insisted. "But then Jennifer came to live with us, and she understands me in ways you never have." I zipped the suitcase shut. "Don't follow me. Don't call me. My lawyer will be in touch." I spent that night in a hotel room, alternating between sobbing and staring numbly at the ceiling. By morning, I had 37 missed calls and dozens of text messages from Jack, Jennifer, and unexpectedly, my parents. Jennifer had called them immediately after I left. I met them at a diner near my hospital. I hoped for comfort, understanding, a shoulder to cry on. Instead, my mother reached across the table and took my hand with a solemn expression. "Daisy, we know you're hurting, but you need to think about the bigger picture here." "The bigger picture?" I pulled my hand away. My husband and sister betrayed me in the worst possible way. My father cleared his throat. "We're not excusing what they did. But there's an innocent child involved now." My mother nodded. "Family has to stick together. Jennifer needs support, not judgment." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. What about what I need? They destroyed my marriage, my trust, everything. "Marriage takes work, sweetheart," my mother said, as if I'd simply had a minor disagreement with Jack. You've always been the strong one, the family peacemaker. And Jennifer's always been irresponsible, my father added. She and this baby will need guidance, structure, things you're good at providing. It dawned on me then, with sickening clarity. They weren't there to support me. They expected me to forgive the unforgivable and help raise my husband's child with my sister. That's not going to happen, I said, gathering my purse. I'm filing for divorce. My mother's face hardened. Don't be hasty, Daisy. This affects all of us. No, Mother. For once in my life, this is about what I need. I found a small apartment across town and filed for divorce the next day. I blocked Jack's number, took a week of emergency leave from work, and started the painful process of separating our lives. I thought the worst was behind me until the certified letter arrived. It was a petition for child support, naming me as the financially responsible party for the unborn child of Jackson Donovan. As the higher, earning spouse in the marriage when the child was conceived, Jack's lawyer argued I had financial obligations regardless of biology. Attached were sworn statements from my parents claiming I had verbally agreed multiple times to support any children from my marriage, regardless of circumstances. They twisted conversations we'd had about possibly adopting or using a surrogate if our fertility issues continued. When I called my mother in disbelief, she was unapologetic. Jennifer can't raise this child on her waitress salary, and Jack's firm is struggling. You make good money, Daisy. You've always said family comes first. I meant supporting each other emotionally, not financially supporting my husband's affair child. Don't be crude. This is your niece or nephew we're talking about. I hung up and called the first divorce attorney on my insurance plans list, Lindsay Parker. The betrayal had only begun. Lindsay Parker's office was on the 20th floor of a gleaming downtown building with views of Centennial Olympic Park. She was a sharp-featured woman in her 40s with short salt and pepper hair and calculating eyes that missed nothing. She reviewed the child support petition with increasingly raised eyebrows. This is unusually aggressive for an initial filing, she said, setting down the documents, especially given the circumstances. Can they actually do this? Make me pay for their baby? Lindsay sighed. Georgia law can be complicated in these situations. Because you were married when the child was conceived, there's a marital presumption that can sometimes extend financial responsibility to both spouses, regardless of biology. My stomach dropped. So I could be forced to pay child support for my husband's affair baby with my own sister? It's not that simple, and I'll fight it every step of the way. But I need to understand the full picture. She leaned forward. Tell me about your finances with Jack. I explained how I earned roughly $90,000 annually as a nursing supervisor, while Jack made about $70,000 at his accounting firm. We had a joint checking account for household expenses, separate savings accounts, and a joint investment account for our future home upgrade and eventual college funds for children. I've been the financially responsible one, I admitted. I paid for Jennifer's college when our parents couldn't afford it. When my dad had his heart attack 3 years ago, I covered their mortgage for 6 months. I've always been the family safety net. Lindsay made notes. And the joint accounts with Jack? I moved my direct deposit to my personal account after I found out, but I hadn't gotten around to separating the joint accounts yet. It seemed like such a small detail compared to everything else. She looked up sharply. Check those accounts immediately. Right now. I pulled up our banking app on my phone and gasped. Our joint checking account, which should have contained over $4,000, showed a balance of $112. The joint investment account was completely empty. He's cleaned them out, I whispered. When did this happen? Lindsay took my phone and scrolled through the transaction history. Multiple withdrawals over the past 3 months, accelerating in the last 2 weeks. This isn't panic withdrawal after being caught. This was planned. That night, I dug deeper into our finances and discovered a pattern that made me physically ill. For months before I found out about the affair, Jack had been moving money around, making large withdrawals, and purchasing items I knew nothing about, including a $3,000 diamond bracelet 2 days before Valentine's Day that I'd never received. At work the next day, I could barely focus on my patients. My colleague Tara found me crying in the supply closet during lunch break. "This isn't like you, Daisy," she said, handing me a tissue. "What's going on?" I told her everything. Unlike my family, Tara was appropriately outraged on my behalf. "That sleazeball! And your sister? That's just twisted." "The worst part is they're trying to make me pay for the baby," I said. "And my own parents are helping them." Tara was quiet for a moment. "I know someone who might be able to help. My cousin went through a bad divorce last year. The husband was hiding assets, lying about his business. She hired this private investigator who uncovered everything. 2 days later, I was sitting across from Mark Turner in a coffee shop near the hospital. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with close, cropped dark hair and intelligent blue eyes. He didn't look like the stereotypical detective from crime shows, dressed instead in a simple button-down shirt and khakis. "Tara gave me a brief overview," he said after introductions, "but I need to hear the whole story from you." I explained the situation while Mark listened intently, occasionally making notes on a small pad. "Your husband's financial activities suggest this wasn't a sudden decision," he observed. "People don't usually start hiding money unless they're planning an exit. But why target me for child support? Jack knows how much the fertility treatments meant to me. To demand I pay for their child seems unnecessarily cruel." Mark's expression softened slightly. Sometimes people justify their worst actions by demonizing their victims. It's easier for them to see you as deserving of this treatment than to admit they're doing something terrible. Over the next week, Mark uncovered information that shattered what remaining illusions I had about my marriage. Jack had been unfaithful throughout our relationship, not just with Jennifer. There were at least 3 other women Mark could confirm, including one of our neighbors and a receptionist at his firm. "There's something else," Mark said during our 3rd meeting. "Your parents remortgaged their house 2 weeks ago. They took out $150,000. That doesn't make sense. Their house was almost paid off. Why would they do that at their age?" According to my source at the bank, they transferred most of it to Jack the next day. He and Jennifer put a down payment on a house in Brookhaven 3 days later. I felt like I'd been punched. My parents gave them money for a house while I'm living in a 1-bedroom apartment? "Jack told your parents you froze all the assets and left him destitute," Mark explained. "He claimed he needed the money for legal fees and to provide for the baby since you were, quote, vindictively withholding financial support." I called my father that night, furious about the remortgage. He was defensive. "Jack is family now, Daisy. They needed help, and you weren't providing it. He cleaned out our accounts. He's been cheating on me for years. And you believe his lies over your own daughter? Don't be dramatic. Jennifer says you've always been jealous of her. Maybe if you'd been a better wife, Jack wouldn't have strayed." I hung up, too hurt and angry to continue. Later that evening, an email notification appeared on my phone from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You should see this." I almost deleted it as spam, but something made me open it. There was no message, just a video attachment. With trembling fingers, I pressed play. The video showed Jack and Jennifer in what appeared to be his office after hours. The timestamp showed a date from 14 months ago, long before she moved in with us. "She's taking the fertility medications like clockwork," Jack was saying, "but the doctor says her chances are still low." Jennifer perched on his desk, playing with his tie. "How long are we going to wait?" "I'm not getting any younger and I don't want to be a 40-year-old first-time mom. We stick to the plan, another 6 months of trying with Daisy. When it doesn't work, I suggest we take a break from treatments. Meanwhile, you and I make our own little miracle." He kissed her, pulling her close. "Once you're pregnant, we play it as an accident, a moment of weakness. Daisy's so desperate for a family she might even agree to raise it with us." "And if she doesn't?" Jennifer asked. Jack smiled coldly. "Then we take her for everything she's worth. Child support, alimony, the house. With her salary and the assets we've built, we'd be set for years. And your parents will back us up. They always side with you." "Poor Daisy," Jennifer said, not sounding sorry at all. "Always the responsible one, always the giver. Time she gave something to us, don't you think?" They laughed, and the video ended. I sat in shocked silence, the phone slipping from my numb fingers. This wasn't a momentary lapse or a recent development. They had been plotting this for over a year. deliberately trying to get pregnant while planning to extract maximum financial support from me. The betrayal was so much deeper, so much more calculated than I had imagined, and my parents were either willing participants or easily manipulated pawns in their scheme. I forwarded the video to Lindsay immediately, then to Mark. For the first time since discovering the affair, I didn't cry. Instead, I felt something harden inside me. They wanted a fight? They were going to get one. The county courthouse was an imposing brick structure with towering white columns and marble floors that amplified every footstep. I arrived with Lindsay 30 minutes before our scheduled hearing, dressed in a conservative navy blue suit that made me look professional and, I hoped, sympathetic. "Remember," Lindsay said as we waited on a hard wooden bench, "Judge Watkins is known for being fair but traditional. He values family connections, so their strategy of presenting a united front might initially appeal to him. Even when that united front is built on lies and manipulation, especially then, people believe what they want to believe, and a pregnant woman with supportive parents makes a compelling image." She patted my hand. "But we have facts on our side, and eventually facts win." When the courtroom doors opened, I nearly lost my composure. Jack, Jennifer, and my parents entered together, all dressed in coordinating outfits of cream and light blue. Jennifer's baby bump was prominently displayed in a fitted dress, one hand resting protectively on it. Jack held her other hand, while my parents flanked them like proud family supporters. They had deliberately styled themselves as the real family, while positioning me as the outsider, the obstacle to their happiness. The calculated nature of it made me feel physically ill. "Don't react," Lindsay whispered, sensing my distress. "That's what they want." Judge Watkins entered, a stern-looking man with wire-rimmed glasses and a full head of silver hair. After preliminaries, Jack's attorney, a slick-looking man named Thomas Reeves, presented their case first. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of financial responsibility toward an innocent child," he began. "Miss Palmer earned substantially more than Mr. Donovan during their marriage. The child was conceived while they were legally married, and Georgia law is clear about the obligations of spouses toward children born during a marriage." He painted me as a vengeful, infertile woman punishing an innocent child for adult mistakes. My client acknowledges the pain this situation has caused, but the welfare of his unborn child must take precedence over hurt feelings. When Jennifer took the stand, she portrayed herself as a victim of circumstance who never meant to fall in love with her sister's husband. "Daisy always promised she would support any children from their marriage," she testified tearfully. "She was so desperate for a family. When this happened, I thought she might even be happy about having a niece or nephew to love." My mother testified next, twisting conversations we'd had about adoption. Daisy always said she would financially support any children from her marriage, no matter how they came into the family. She talked about adoption, surrogacy, any option to become a mother. My father added, "She's always been the responsible one, the provider. This sudden refusal to help is completely out of character and clearly driven by spite." Former friends from our community, people I thought I could count on, testified about Jack's character and how devoted he'd seemed to starting a family. None mentioned his infidelities or financial manipulations. By the time our side could present, I felt overwhelmed and betrayed. How could so many people believe such obvious lies? How could my own parents distort reality so completely? Lindsay started by establishing my history of financial support for my family, including paying for Jennifer's education and helping my parents during my father's illness. "This is a pattern of exploitation, Your Honor, not of voluntary giving, Miss. Palmer has been systematically used by her family for years, and this child support claim is simply the latest attempt to extract money from her." When it was my turn to testify, I focused on facts, the emptied bank accounts, the history of deception, the sudden demand for child support when Jack's income alone would adequately provide for a child. During cross-examination, Thomas Reeves attempted to portray me as cold and calculating. "Isn't it true that you left the marital home immediately upon learning of the pregnancy, abandoning your husband without attempting reconciliation?" "I left because I discovered my sister and husband had been having an affair in my home, yes." "And you immediately cut off all financial support, knowing they had a child on the way?" My husband emptied our joint accounts before I could access them, I clarified. I didn't cut off support. He took what wasn't entirely his. Reeves smirked. But you're refusing to contribute now, correct? Despite your superior income? I'm refusing to fund the betrayal of my marriage vows, yes. The questioning continued, becoming increasingly hostile. Reeves implied I had been emotionally unavailable, obsessed with fertility treatments to the detriment of my marriage, and jealous of my sister's natural ability to conceive. Just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Jennifer was recalled to the stand for additional testimony. She described how I had supposedly promised to financially support any child of the marriage, regardless of circumstances. Daisy always said family was everything, Jennifer insisted. She told me multiple times that she would make sure any baby in our family would want for nothing. Then came the moment that changed everything. Lindsay asked about Jennifer's current living situation and financial support. Jack and I are managing, Jennifer said vaguely. We're living within our means while we prepare for the baby. And how are you paying your expenses? Lindsay pressed. You testified earlier that you haven't been employed for 10 months. Jack provides for us, and I've been careful with my savings. Lindsay approached with a document. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce bank records for Jennifer Palmer. As you can see, she's been making regular withdrawals from an account containing over $70,000, an account my client had no knowledge of. Jennifer's face paled. That's my personal account. It's not relevant. The source of those funds is quite relevant, Lindsay countered, particularly since $60,000 was transferred to that account from the joint investment account of Daisy and Jack Donovan 3 days before miscount. Palmer claims the affair was discovered. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Watkins banged his gavel for order, then studied the bank records with a deepening frown. In light of this new information, he announced, I'm ordering a complete financial investigation of all parties before proceeding further. We'll reconvene in 30 days after a full accounting of assets has been completed. As we left the courtroom, I caught Jack's eye. For the first time, he looked worried. This wasn't going according to their plan at all. The month-long court delay gave us precious time to strengthen our case. Lindsay suggested we meet at her office the day after the hearing to regroup and strategize. You did well yesterday, she said, offering me coffee from her expensive-looking machine. But we need to dig deeper if we're going to counter their emotional appeal to the judge. I felt like I was in some bizarre alternate reality, I admitted. Listening to them twist everything, watching my own parents support their lies. That's why we need more than just bank records. We need to establish a pattern of deception and manipulation that even a sympathetic judge can't ignore. Mark joined us, bringing thick folders of financial documents and a laptop. I've been backtracing the money trail, he said. Jack didn't just empty your joint accounts. He's been systematically moving assets for over a year. He showed us spreadsheets documenting transfers, withdrawals, and purchases. He's been funneling money to Jennifer's account in smaller amounts that wouldn't trigger your attention, then larger sums as they got closer to executing their plan. How did I miss this? I asked, feeling stupid and naive. Financial infidelity is insidious, Lindsay said, especially when it's done by someone you trust completely. There's more, Mark added. I found these while reviewing his email accounts. He handed me printouts of correspondence between Jack and a real estate agent from 13 months earlier, inquiring about family homes in Brookhaven, the same area where they had recently purchased a house with my parents' money. This was all planned, I whispered, long before Jennifer even moved in with us. Over the next few days, I focused on gathering personal records that could contradict their claims. In our spare bedroom closet, I found journals where I'd documented our fertility journey, including specific conversations with Jack about adoption possibilities that directly contradicted Jennifer's testimony. I also discovered medical records showing that while I had been dutifully taking fertility medications with all their physical and emotional side effects, Jack had repeatedly postponed his own follow-up appointments and tests, claiming work conflicts. 2 weeks into our investigation, I received a surprising call from my estranged Aunt Susan, my mother's younger sister who had been ostracized from the family years earlier over some mysterious falling out. Daisy, it's your Aunt Susan. I hope you don't mind me calling. I heard about what's happening with Jennifer and your husband. We arranged to meet at a quiet cafe outside the city. Aunt Susan looked remarkably like my mother, but with kinder eyes and a warmth my mother had always lacked. She hugged me tightly when we met, something my own mother rarely did. "I've wanted to reach out for years," she said as we settled with our coffees, "but your mother made it clear I wasn't welcome. When my friend Charlotte mentioned the court case, I knew I had to contact you. How did your friend know about my case?" "She works in the courthouse records department." Small world. Susan hesitated. "Daisy, there's something you should know about your parents and their history with Jennifer." What Susan revealed shook me to my core. My parents had always favored Jennifer not just because of her charm or looks, but because of a financial arrangement made years ago. My maternal grandfather had established a trust fund for his grandchildren with a stipulation that the money would only be accessible when the grandchild married and started a family of their own. "Jennifer's portion is worth about $300,000, Susan explained. "Your mother has been desperate for her to settle down and claim it. They've been living beyond their means for years, counting on that money. But I'm married. Or was. Why didn't they push me to claim my portion?" Susan looked uncomfortable. "Your portion was used years ago. Your parents convinced your grandfather that you needed it for college, but most of it went to bail your father out of business debts. There was a provision that if one grandchild's portion was used early, the other portion would increase. Jennifer's share is now closer to $500,000. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. My parents' insistence that I forgive Jack and Jennifer, their financial support of the relationship, their willingness to remortgage their home, it wasn't just about favoring Jennifer, it was about accessing that trust fund money. "There's someone else you should meet," Susan said. "My daughter Amanda went through something similar with her ex-husband. Different circumstances, but the same kind of betrayal and financial manipulation. Amanda, my cousin, who I barely knew, became an unexpected source of support. In her late 30s, with a no-nonsense attitude and a successful therapy practice, she not only offered emotional solidarity, but professional connections. You need to document the psychological impact of this betrayal, she advised over dinner at her comfortable bungalow. I can refer you to Dr. Carter. She specializes in cases involving family betrayal and can provide expert testimony if needed. Dr. Carter, a compassionate psychologist with 30 years of experience, helped me recognize the lifelong pattern of exploitation by my family. What you're describing is a family system where you were assigned the role of provider and caretaker from an early age, she explained during our sessions. Your sense of responsibility was exploited rather than appreciated. With each session, each new piece of evidence, each supportive conversation with my growing network of allies, I felt stronger and more clear-eyed about what had happened and what I needed to do. 3 days before our court date, Mark called with a bombshell discovery. "I found something you need to see immediately." I met him at Lindsay's office within the hour. The expression on his face was grimmer than I'd ever seen it. "Jack has another child," he said without preamble. "A 6-year-old boy in Savannah. The mother has been trying to get consistent child support for years." He showed me documentation, birth certificate, paternity test results, court filings for support enforcement. "He knew about this child when we married?" I asked, feeling the room spin slightly. "Not only knew, but has been paying minimal, sporadic support while fighting the mother's attempts to get a formal order." Mark pushed another folder toward me. "And there's this." The second bombshell. Evidence of tax fraud involving my parents' small business where Jack had worked as an accountant before joining his current firm. He had helped them hide income, claim fraudulent deductions, and essentially cheat the IRS out of tens of thousands of dollars over 3 years. "This explains so much," Lindsay said, reviewing the documents. "Your parents are as compromised as Jack is. They can't afford for you to win this case because it might expose their own illegal activities." I felt a strange calm settle over me as all the pieces finally fit together. So this was never really about the baby or family unity. It was about money, control, and covering up their own misdeeds. "With this evidence, we can do more than just defeat the child support claim," Lindsay said. "We can potentially file counterclaims for financial recovery and refer the tax fraud evidence to prosecutors." For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself to feel something close to hope. The truth was coming to light, and with it, the possibility of real justice. "Are you ready for this?" Mark asked gently. "Once we present this evidence, there's no going back. Your relationship with your parents, with Jennifer, it will likely never recover." I thought about the years of manipulation, the calculated betrayal, the willingness to exploit me financially while destroying my marriage and self-worth. "I'm ready," I said with quiet determination. They chose this path, not me. As I drove home that evening, I realized something had fundamentally shifted inside me. The hurt and confusion had transformed into clarity and resolve. I wasn't just fighting against their injustice now. I was fighting for my future, for my right to define family on my own terms. The betrayal had awakened something in me that had been dormant for too long, the knowledge that I deserved better, and for the first time, I truly believed I would get it. The morning of our final court hearing dawned bright and clear, a beautiful Georgia spring day that belied the storm brewing inside the courthouse. I dressed carefully in a simple gray suit that Lindsay had suggested would project both strength and dignity. "Remember," she said as we waited in the courthouse lobby, "no matter what they say or do today, stay calm. Let the evidence speak for itself." When we entered the courtroom, I immediately noticed that Jack seemed less confident than before, his usual smugness replaced by a tight, nervous expression. Jennifer, now visibly pregnant at 6 months, still held his hand but kept glancing anxiously at my parents, who looked grim and determined. Judge Watkins entered, reviewed his notes, and addressed the court. "I've received the financial investigator's preliminary report, which raises several concerning questions. Before making any determination on the child support petition, I want to hear final arguments from both sides." Jack's attorney went first, mostly reiterating their previous points but with a new emphasis on the child's needs rather than my alleged obligations. He carefully avoided mentioning the financial discrepancies that had been uncovered, focusing instead on creating an emotional appeal about the innocent unborn baby. When it was Jennifer's turn to speak, she stood confidently, one hand on her belly. She looked directly at me with an expression of both triumph and contempt. "Your Honor, my sister has always been financially stable, while I've struggled. All we're asking is that she fulfill her responsibility to family. The baby deserves support from both sides of the family." She smirked slightly. "Daisy needs to pay up or step aside and let us move on with our lives without her interference." Jack nodded in agreement, squeezing her hand supportively. My parents then rose together, my father speaking while my mother nodded emphatically. "We raised our daughters to believe in family responsibility," he declared. "Daisy has always been the provider, the responsible one. Her refusal now to help support her niece or nephew is shocking and out of character. We're simply asking the court to enforce the moral and legal obligation she has toward this child." Judge Watkins turned to me. "Miss Palmer, do you wish to make a statement before your attorney presents closing arguments?" I felt a moment of doubt. These people had been my family. Despite everything, a part of me still remembered Sunday dinners, Christmas mornings, moments of connection. Was I really prepared to expose everything, to potentially send my own parents and sister to face legal consequences? Jack must have sensed my hesitation. He leaned forward, a triumphant gleam in his eye. "She knows we're right, Your Honor. She's just too stubborn to admit it." That did it. The last thread of familial loyalty snapped. I stood, thanking the judge for the opportunity to speak. I smiled calmly, gathering my thoughts. The courtroom went silent, waiting. "Your Honor, I came to this courtroom thinking this case was about a betrayal of trust between a husband and wife, a sister and sister. I was wrong." I took a deep breath. "This case is about a calculated, years-long conspiracy to exploit me financially while deliberately causing me emotional harm." I gestured to Lindsay, who began distributing folders to the judge and court clerk. "What you're receiving is evidence that Jack Donovan and Jennifer Palmer began their affair at least 14 months ago, long before she moved into our home. They deliberately plotted to conceive a child while I was undergoing painful fertility treatments, with the specific intent of using that child to extract financial support from me." The judge opened his folder, eyebrows rising as he reviewed the contents. I continued, my voice growing stronger. The evidence includes video documentation of their conspiracy, bank records showing systematic theft from our joint accounts, and proof that my parents were complicit in this scheme, motivated by their desire to access a trust fund that would only be available once Jennifer had a child. My parents shifted uncomfortably. My mother started to speak, but the judge held up his hand for silence. Furthermore, I continued, during our investigation, we discovered that Jack Donovan has concealed the existence of another child, a 6-year-old son in Savannah, for whom he has evaded consistent child support obligations. Jack's face drained of color. Jennifer turned to him in shock, clearly hearing this for the first time. Finally, and most seriously, we have documented evidence of tax fraud involving Jack Donovan's accounting work for my parents' business over a 3-year period, including falsified deductions and unreported income totaling over $60,000. The courtroom erupted. Jennifer was yelling at Jack about the hidden child. My parents were frantically whispering to their attorney. Judge Watkins banged his gavel repeatedly, calling for order. These are serious allegations that go well beyond the scope of a child support petition, the judge said when quiet was restored. Miss Palmer, are you prepared to submit this evidence for further investigation by appropriate authorities? I am, Your Honor. I take no pleasure in this, but I cannot allow their fraudulent claims to go unchallenged, nor can I permit their exploitation to continue. Lindsay then presented our formal response to the child support petition, methodically addressing each legal point with reference to the new evidence. She emphasized that while I harbored no ill will toward the unborn child, there was no legal or moral basis for making me financially responsible for a child deliberately conceived through deception and betrayal. By the time she finished, Jack looked defeated, Jennifer tearful and angry, and my parents ashen with fear. Judge Watkins called a brief recess to review all the materials before making his ruling. In the hallway, my mother approached, her voice low and urgent. Daisy, you need to withdraw those documents. You don't understand what you're doing to this family. I understand perfectly, I replied calmly. I'm ending the exploitation. I'm breaking the cycle. We're your parents, she hissed, after everything we've done for you. Everything you've done to me, I corrected. There's a difference. When court resumed, Judge Watkins didn't mince words. Based on the evidence presented, I am dismissing the petition for child support in its entirety, Miss. Palmer has no legal obligation to provide financial support for this child. Relief flooded through me, but he wasn't finished. Additionally, I am referring the evidence of tax fraud to the district attorney's office for investigation. Mr. Donovan, I strongly suggest you update the court in Savannah regarding your previously undisclosed income, as failure to provide accurate financial information in child support cases can result in serious penalties. He looked directly at Jennifer and my parents. The court takes a very dim view of using children as pawns in financial schemes. While no criminal charges related to the conspiracy are being filed at this time, I want to be clear that any further attempts to extract money through manipulative or fraudulent means could result in legal consequences. As the judge stood to leave, Jack and Jennifer sat frozen, their plan in shambles. My parents began shouting about family loyalty and betrayal. "How could you do this to your own blood?" my father yelled. "After everything we sacrificed for you." "You'll regret this, Daisy," my mother added, her face contorted with rage. "You've destroyed this family." As they were escorted from the courtroom by security, still screaming about my betrayal, I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sadness for what could have been, and a growing sense of freedom from what had been. Lindsay squeezed my hand. "It's over. You won." But as I watched my former family being led away, I knew this wasn't really about winning. It was about truth, justice, and finally breaking free from a lifetime of exploitation disguised as love. The real victory wasn't in the courtroom at all. It was in the strength I had found within myself to stand up and say, enough. 6 months passed, like turning pages in a new chapter of my life. The divorce was finalized with no financial obligations on my part, thanks to the overwhelming evidence of Jack's infidelity and financial misconduct. The judge even ordered him to repay funds he had taken from our joint accounts, though I had yet to see a penny of it. Jack faced multiple legal challenges: back child support claims from the mother of his son in Savannah, now adjusted to reflect his actual income, an investigation into tax fraud that resulted in substantial penalties, and the collapse of his professional reputation when the accounting firm fired him after learning of his misconduct. Jennifer gave birth to a baby boy in October. She sent me a birth announcement with a handwritten note that read, "He's your nephew, despite everything. When you're ready to be part of his life, let me know." I tucked it away, neither accepting nor rejecting the olive branch. Some wounds needed more time to heal. My parents faced their own consequences. The tax fraud investigation resulted in penalties and interest payments that forced them to sell their house. The trust fund they had coveted remained locked in legal limbo as trustees questioned the circumstances surrounding Jennifer's claim to it. Last I heard, they had moved to a small apartment in Florida, still blaming me for their downfall rather than their own choices. But my story wasn't about their ending, it was about my beginning. Aunt Susan became the family I never truly had, inviting me for Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations with her partner Richard and their extended circle of friends. My cousin Amanda and I grew close, meeting weekly for coffee and conversations that helped me rebuild my understanding of what healthy relationships should look like. My friendship with Tara deepened as she stood by me through the worst days, bringing comfort food to my apartment and dragging me out for walks when I wanted to hide from the world. Lindsay, my attorney, became more than just a legal advocate. She became a mentor and friend, introducing me to her social circle of strong, independent women who had weathered their own storms. And then there was Mark. What began as a professional relationship during the investigation gradually evolved into something more. It started with coffee meetings that ran long, conversations that extended beyond case details into personal interests, dreams, and philosophies. His integrity, compassion, and unwavering support during my darkest moments revealed a man unlike any I had known. Our first official date was a picnic in Piedmont Park, 4 months after the court case concluded. Sitting on a blanket under autumn leaves, I found myself laughing genuinely for the first time in what felt like forever. "It's good to see you happy," he said, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. I wasn't sure I remembered how, I admitted. He took my hand gently. "Healing isn't linear. There will still be hard days ahead, but you've already proven how strong you are." I squeezed his hand back, appreciating that he didn't rush me or make promises neither of us could keep. We were taking things slowly, building a foundation of trust and respect before anything else. Meanwhile, work became not just a distraction, but a source of renewed purpose. My experiences gave me a deeper empathy for the children in my pediatric ward, particularly those from troubled families. I started a support group for young patients, dealing with family trauma, using my training and personal journey to help them navigate their emotions. This led to volunteering with a local organization that assisted children in the foster system, which in turn opened an unexpected door. During a training session, I met a social worker named Diane, who specialized in adoption placements for older children, those who often struggled to find permanent homes. "We need more potential parents who understand trauma and resilience," she told me over coffee after the session. "Have you ever considered adoption as a single parent?" The question caught me off guard. I had assumed my dreams of motherhood were on indefinite hold, perhaps permanently deferred after everything that had happened. "I don't know if I'm ready," I said honestly. "Nobody's ever completely ready for parenthood," Diane replied with a knowing smile. "But from what I've seen, you have more to offer than most." The seed was planted. Over the following weeks, I researched single-parent adoption, attended information sessions, and had long conversations with Amanda, who had adopted her son as a single mother years earlier. "It's the hardest and most rewarding thing I've ever done," she told me. "But Daisy, you have to be sure you're doing it for the right reasons, not to fill a void or prove something to yourself." Her words resonated. I took time for deep reflection, working through my motivations with Dr. Carter. Was I truly ready to take this step? Or was I rushing to replace what I had lost? The answer came gradually, not in a lightning bolt of certainty, but in a growing conviction that my capacity to love hadn't been diminished by betrayal. If anything, it had been clarified and strengthened. I began the application process with clear eyes, understanding both the challenges and the joy that lay ahead. 1 year after that devastating day in court, my life had transformed completely. I had purchased a small but charming bungalow in a friendly neighborhood with excellent schools. Mark and I were dating steadily, building something honest and genuine at our own pace. My adoption application was progressing well, with home studies completed and references submitted. On a crisp November morning, exactly 13 months after the court hearing, I received the call that would change everything again. A 4-year-old girl named Lily needed an immediate placement. Her background included neglect and abandonment, but according to Diane, she was resilient, bright, and desperately in need of stability and love. "We thought of you immediately," Diane said. "Would you be willing to meet her tomorrow?" The next day, I sat in a colorful visitation room at the Family Services Center, my heart pounding with anticipation. When Diane led in a tiny girl with solemn brown eyes and curly hair pulled into uneven pigtails, something clicked into place inside me. Lily clutched a worn stuffed elephant and regarded me cautiously from behind Diane's legs. I knelt down to her level, smiling gently. "Hello, Lily. My name is Daisy. I really like your elephant." She studied me for a long moment before whispering, "His name is Trunk." "That's a perfect name," I replied. "Thank you for introducing us." By the end of our visit, she had shown me Trunk's favorite dance moves and confided that she didn't like carrots but was willing to try them again maybe tomorrow. As Diane prepared to take her back to her temporary foster home, Lily turned to me with unexpected directness. "Are you going to be my forever mom?" she asked. The question pierced straight to my heart. "I'd like to try," I answered honestly. "We need to get to know each other first, but I would very much like that." She nodded seriously, as if assessing my answer. "Trunk says you have kind eyes." 2 months later, after multiple visits, overnight stays, and mountains of paperwork, Lily moved into my home as a foster placement with intent to adopt. The journey wasn't smooth. She had nightmares, testing behaviors, moments of heartbreaking insecurity, but with each challenge we overcame together, our bond strengthened. Mark was wonderfully patient, understanding that Lily's needs had to come first. He visited often but never stayed overnight, gradually building his own relationship with her based on respect for her boundaries and genuine interest in her world. 6 months after Lily came home, I hosted a small gathering in my backyard. Aunt Susan and Richard brought their famous potato salad. Amanda came with her teenage son Tyler, who immediately appointed himself Lily's protective older cousin. Tara and her husband Paul set up a bubble machine that kept the children entertained for hours. Lindsay arrived with a handmade quilt for Lily's bed. As evening approached, Mark helped me bring out dessert, while Lily showed Tyler her new climbing skills on the backyard playset. "She's thriving," Mark observed, watching her confident movements. "And so are you." I leaned against his shoulder, taking in the scene of my chosen family gathered together. I never imagined my life could look like this after everything that happened. "That's the thing about betrayal," he said thoughtfully. "It breaks you open. But what grows from those broken places can be stronger and more beautiful than what was there before." Later, as we sat around the fire pit with Lily dozing in my lap, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here. The pain hadn't disappeared completely. There would always be scars from such profound betrayal, but it no longer defined me. What defined me now was the life I had consciously built from the ashes, the boundaries I had learned to set, the authentic relationships I had cultivated, the child sleeping trustingly in my arms, and the man sitting beside me who had shown me what real partnership looked like. The family that had betrayed me had inadvertently given me the greatest gift, the freedom to discover my own strength, to redefine family on my own terms, and to build a life based on genuine love, rather than obligation and exploitation. As Lily stirred in my arms, her sleepy voice murmured, "Love you, Mommy." It was the first time she had called me that, and as happy tears filled my eyes, I knew with absolute certainty that every painful step of my journey had led exactly where I was meant to be. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after a betrayal? What helped you find your strength? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to hear more stories of resilience, and share with someone who might need to know they're not alone in their journey. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes our greatest pain can lead us to our truest purpose.